people who are due to join us in the next couple minutes, but thank you for being here on time. I recognize a lot of your names and faces, but I see a lot of new people as well, which is always great. We're now in our 4th year of Crypto Mondays. We're about, I guess, 14, 15 months into virtual Crypto Mondays. And I think we're all looking forward to a return to face-to-face meetings at some point, hopefully in the next few months. But we are very pleased to have you here. Our speaker tonight, who will be formally introduced by Oleg, is Paula Pettit, Director of Business Development at Linum Labs, which is a business that is been founded by our co-organizer, Devin Krantz, and which has been very involved in a number of interesting elements within the blockchain crypto world. Paula herself has been very involved in NFT development, and I think it's a subject we're all really looking forward to. I'm going to pass you over to Oleg now, who's going to give you a bit more detail.
Thank you so much, Larry. So welcome, everyone. So as always, if you have questions during the talk, please just write them in the chat. We're gonna run through all of them in the end. And if there's something very timely, I might raise it during the talk as well. And just to introduce Paula very quickly, as Larry said, she heads the business development at Linum Labs, and she previously successfully founded and sold 2 companies, Parcel22 and Bitfract, which was acquired by ShapeShift, the pretty famous crypto exchange, which is super exciting. She worked across the industry in the US, EU, UK, and is currently based in London. Over the past 6 months, she has been very much focused on the NFT ecosystem, and that's what she will be presenting to us about today. And the floor is yours, Paula.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. A pleasure to be here. I think I will share my screen to begin, but just a moment. Share. Let me know if you could see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Screen, okay. Great. So thank you so much. As Larry and Oleg said, I am the head of business development at Linum Labs. We are a blockchain software, smart contract software development studio. Over the past 6 months, with the huge boom of NFTs, we have been working very extensively in them. They've been a very exciting kind of pool to jump into, and I wanted to share some of the things we've kind of learned, some of the applications we've seen, and some of the places where we see that they can make the most difference in the coming years as it matures. But before we even begin, what is an NFT? So an NFT stands for non-fungible token, and to the uninitiated, that doesn't really mean much either. But fungible basically means an item can easily be exchanged with a similar item of equal value. So, you know, a pound for a pound, a dollar for a dollar, a Bitcoin for a Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. I could trade my dollar for a dollar, and I don't care which one I have, so long as I have my dollar. However, NFTs are non-fungible, meaning they specifically cannot be traded easily with one another. They don't mean the same thing. So in these examples I have here on the right, these are different items that could be hypothetically NFTs. So a front row ticket is not the same as a back row ticket. This smaller medium house is not the same as that, you know, bigger house. And this, you know, cute cat is not as cool as this objectively cooler floating cat. So these cannot be traded equally one for one. It does in fact matter which one of these you have. So contrary to popular thought or belief, NFTs are not actually the asset. They're actually just a cryptographic token that represents ownership of the asset. So if you do have music or art or any form of digital file as an NFT, for the most part, that data is not actually the NFT, but the NFT is more a sort of certificate that says that you own it. So NFTs can only have one owner, which basically creates digital scarcity. And scarcity is what has allowed basically these NFTs to sell for such crazy prices because only one person can own it. So that allows it to kind of be outbidded. And while we've heard about them extensively this year and in all forms of news, my mom's asking me about it, et cetera, they've been around for a while. They've been around almost as long as blockchain. They started in 2012 with colored coins, and more famously in 2017 with CryptoKitties, which is that cute cat I showed you in the last page. So, you know, CryptoKitties clogged up the Ethereum network in 2017. They've been around for a bit. However, they have exploded exponentially this year. They've exploded exponentially this year, primarily in the digital art space, which we will get to in a moment. But some of the traits that are, you know, for NFTs is that they are unique. As I said, one does not equal the other. They're indivisible. They cannot be separated into smaller pieces. They're, for the most part, indestructible. Certain ones you can create a burn function to delete them, but I won't really focus on that. For the most part, if you do mint an NFT, it's there, it exists. And they have absolute ownership. So if I own an NFT that says I own this property or this art, nobody can take it away from me. No third party, no creator, no anyone. It's mine and that's it. And then they are verifiable. So you can see where it was minted, when it was minted, who it was minted by, who owns it, what paper trail it has. You don't need a third party to basically verify where it came from. So I think the reason most of us have heard of NFTs is because of, as I said, the digital art space. This year, NFTs have exploded. And, you know, I highlighted here some of the biggest ones that sold for crazy amounts. So the first one is Beeple. He sold a art called The First 5,000 Days for $69 million. And that is that art there on the top right. It's actually made him the third most wealthy living artist today, which may be confusing, but it's not something to particularly laugh about. Twitter's founder, Jack Dorsey, sold his first ever tweet as an NFT for $2.5 million. Grimes, Elon Musk's partner and musician, sold hers for $6 million. And on February 19, this Pop-Tart cat, the meme from 2011, was sold for more than $500,000. However, it's much, much, much more than JPEGs. Although, you know, those are getting the headlines because, I mean, a collage was sold for $69 million. That is not really what NFTs are primarily about. That's honestly kind of just what art's been about. You know, you've had for centuries a canvas being sold for multi-millions. So this is not something specifically new to the NFT space. However, there's so many new things that can be brought to the NFT space. And I've kind of highlighted some of my favorites here. First off, collectibles, which is the one that we have seen primarily. So art, as I said, art, it's scarce, it's shared. They can be created as NFTs. Trading cards as well. So we've seen NBA Top Shot. We've seen some other come out with trading cards. And so this is the first time you've ever seen collectibles exist in the digital space, because it's the first time it's ever been able to be scarce and verifiable. You can put also any other digital asset on it. So that tweet sold for 2.5 million, NFT. You can also do things like unstoppable domains. They basically mint NFTs that represent different domains. And that allows people to basically own the domains that they want and sell them and trade them without having to go through like a third party system like GoDaddy. Some of the other applications are music. So we're seeing a lot of musicians come out with their own NFTs. So famously, you have Kings of Leon, you have Snoop Dogg, you have a couple others really coming out with their NFTs. And while I admit it's probably not the best way to actually listen to music, it allows fans to basically support their artists. And it's basically a way to combat the kind of streaming system that basically is not rewarding artists like as they should. So this is a way for fans to support them and show that they're supporting them basically. However, from there, moving into some of the applications that I think are a bit cooler and like a little bit less abstract. So gaming is one that's very, very interesting. We're seeing it with networks such as Engine. Engine is kind of focusing on this, and we've seen it around a little bit in the industry. Basically, you're able to create an NFT to represent items in a game. So if I were to have a pair of shoes and I mint an NFT for them, I could then take them into the different games that like hosted. So I could go from League of Legends with my custom shoes and then take it over to Fortnite with my custom shoes there. So it makes it less of an asset that exists inside a game and more an asset that is digital that I can take around me into these digital worlds, which is, I think, a very unique application that we're going to see really be expanded on in years to come. Then from there, a really applicable version is credentials. So basically, I could have my identity, and through that, I could save all the relevant credentials of my life. I do think the most groundbreaking ones are in the health records situation and in the education spectrum. So basically, so I've moved several times in my life. Devin could probably confirm that. And I've been to way too many doctors to count. And then moving my health records from one doctor to another doctor, whether it's a different state, country, network, it's very, very tough. And it makes it so it's not very consistent throughout my life. However, if I owned an NFT that basically showed the health records, I could then take it from one doctor to another and not need to depend on a third party to basically share out my NFT or share out my health record. Same could be said for education. So you can mint a credential that basically represents your education. So I could mint my diploma, I could mint a workshop I went to, and this allows me to, again, own that data and then share it with the third parties that are now relevant that need to learn about it. So this is especially beneficial for smaller education systems. Obviously, very high institution universities, they can show out diplomas and it's pretty verifiable. But if I were to go to a small workshop, it's very hard for a third party to be able to verify that. However, if I had an NFT minted for it, it'd be a lot easier to share. Then you move into items like tickets. If concert tickets, if they were minted via NFTs, and there is quite a bit of movement in that industry for that, it's much easier to combat counterfeit. And when it would be shared on secondary markets and sold on secondary markets, it would substantially decrease the risk that you buy a counterfeit ticket. In that same vein, basically luxury items. You know, if you have a luxury purse that sells for $10,000, you'd hate when they create, you know, a counterfeit version of it. However, if those brands were to mint NFTs that basically verified the authenticity of it, this would be able to really highly cut back the counterfeits that exist in these luxury markets. And this is some of the conversations we've seen around the industry recently. One that I think is really, really interesting is the property and real estate market. I'm not going to dive into it too deep because I can go way deep into it. But basically, the real estate market is pretty outdated and hasn't adopted enough new technologies. So the transfer of ownership, of accounting, of everything that exists in the real estate situation is really, really just slow. So if you were able to mint NFTs that related to deeds of real estate, they'd be much easier to be transferred and you wouldn't have to go through as much extensive due diligence that currently exists. There's much more to be talked about that one, but you can do it on your own time. And then the final one is supply chain. And this is one of the ones that has already been pretty implemented. It basically is able to verify where certain items come from the supply chain. If at each step you're able to scan an NFT or scan a QR code that says where that item came from, you can then verifiably say that it, you know, came from an ethically sourced area in the beginning, and you can see it at all points where it was in the supply chain and verify that you know, it came from where it said they came from. Some additional NFT benefits that exist outside of being verifiable and allow you to own the data is that you can do some new things you haven't been able to do before. One of them that we've explored quite extensively, we get quite a few requests for it, is forced royalties. So basically forced royalties makes it so every time an NFT is sold, the original creator gets a cut from that sell. So if a creator were to sell an NFT, they get a small portion of it. If that NFT is resold, the original creator gets another portion from it, and so on. This allows the original creator to basically get some exposure to that upside that could potentially be gained as their NFT gains value. This is especially valuable for artists and authors and musicians as they move into the digital space, because they've kind of been left out of that royalty situation as we've moved digitally, and it's so vital basically for their income. Another really interesting application is perk redemption. So if you have an NFT that certifies that you bought something, or that you're a member to something, or just basically have some form of access, you could then use it to redeem it for different perks. So we've seen perks where you can redeem your NFT for access to an artist, or access to a special event, or some form of gift. It's something that's verifiable that a third party can then reward you for owning, basically. So the current ecosystem, right now, the most popular marketplaces are OpenC, Rarible, Super Rare, and Nifty Gateway. They're basically like eBay for the NFT space. Users can come in, mint any NFT, they can sell it out, people can browse and they can search around. Some of them are a bit more gated. So I believe Rarible, you need to be approved to be able to mint, but it's still basically the same thing. It's kind of just an open ecosystem to sell and mint different NFTs. But after kind of the success of some of these marketplaces, we've seen some more specialized marketplaces come up, most notably NBA Top Shot. If you guys have heard of it, it's basically NBA trading cards as NFTs, and it has exploded in popularity. I think it has been one of the main things that really pushed the NFT space. Everybody's coming trying to ask how they can be the next NBA Top Shot. So that is one of the most specialized marketplaces that has been very successful. I've also mentioned Engine, which is the one that does kind of the gaming industry. So you can go buy gaming items on there. However, I am very positive just from the conversations we've been having and the things we've seen that more and more specialized ecosystems are going to move towards digital. You know, with the pandemic, you're seeing art galleries come on because less people are able to visit physical art galleries, so they're moving digital. So we've seen some very, very big names look at creating digital versions of their curated art galleries. Musicians and sports clubs doing the same things. The musicians launching NFTs related to their music. The sports clubs trying to do their own version of NBA Top Shot in their industry. I think it is a space that we're going to see continue to really expand over the coming years. So some of the most popular blockchains to develop your NFTs on are Ethereum, Flow, and EVM compatible chains. EVM compatible chains just means they're Ethereum-like. So you have Matic and POA on those. So Ethereum has the most community support and is the most interoperable, however, and has the most existing marketplaces. So if you're really looking for an interoperable NFT, Ethereum's still a good shot. However, as I'm sure you may know, it suffers from incredibly high gas prices, which if you're selling low budget NFTs, doesn't make sense if you're going to pay 40 pounds in gas alongside it. So with that, we've seen more EVM compatible chains becoming good alternatives. So depending on the level of interoperability needed and the different kind of goals that an NFT marketplace is looking to achieve, you can build quite successfully on EVM compatible chains like Matic and like POA. And there's many more that I'd be kind of happy to talk about some of the pros and cons of them, but these are the blockchains that we're seeing the most activity on. So currently there's quite a bit of controversy in the NFT space, and it's basically around energy consumption. And it's saying that, you know, creating a collectible as an NFT is not good for the environment. And there's a couple arguments to that. First off, there's many more applications than just collectibles. Secondarily, though, and much more importantly, is NFTs do not exist on the Bitcoin blockchain primarily. And Bitcoin is the one, as Elon Musk has very famously recently pointed out, has a very, very poor carbon footprint. And that's because it is a proof of work system. However, NFTs are not built on Bitcoin. They're primarily built on Ethereum and Ethereum-like chains. And Ethereum is moving away from proof of work to proof of stake, which basically cuts the carbon footprint by 99%, kind of leaving this argument a little moot, like it's not very relevant anymore. And while Ethereum is moving to ETH 2.0, going to proof of stake, most of its side chains are actually already proof of stake. So, you know, Polygon Matic, the reason the gas prices are so low is because it is proof of stake and it does not require nearly as much energy. So if NFTs were minted on Bitcoin, this would be a valuable argument, but seeing as they're not, it's pretty irrelevant. So it's just worth kind of bringing up when you are having these discussions. So some of the futures of NFTs is we're just beginning to scratch the surface. However, as the ecosystem matures, some of the main things that need to be sorted out are the legal aspects of NFTs. So as I said, NFTs are not actually the asset themselves, but more as a pointer that shows that you own that asset over there. So one of the main things that does need to be worked out is the legal implications behind it. If you do mint an NFT that represents a commercial building, you need to make sure that legally it does so as well. So I'd say that that's one of the biggest questions that still remains and one of the biggest hurdles that still needs to be overcome. But there's a lot of research going into it, and that, you know, the higher these assets become and the more expensive they become, the more you know, worked out this will become. But you know, as it does become more mature, the hype will turn into real use cases. So I don't think the long-term hype is selling a piece of art, a digital art, for $69 million. The long-term use case is allowing people to own their NFTs, own their collectibles, own their data, own their assets, be able to share them when needed, be able to trade them when needed, and be able to sell them without needing, you know, a third party to oversee it. And, you know, having these authentic items, these scarce authentic items that have never been able to exist in this manner in the digital space. And, you know, NFTs don't need third parties to oversee them. So they're easily interoperable on the same blockchain. So I can take it from, you know, one creator and sell it over here and work in ways that hasn't really existed in the digital space up until now. So yeah, those are that's kind of a high level of NFTs, where they've come, some of the places we've seen them and where they can go, but there's really so much more that can be said on it. And I kind of just wanted to also just open it up to see what kind of questions people had and what kind of discussions could be created around it.
Thank you so much, Paula. This was really interesting, really insightful. And we also have a few questions already. One question from Patrick, the first one. How does the connection between the NFT and the wallet work?
So, I mean, it depends. So you can store your NFT inside of your wallet. The main thing is making sure that it's compatible, that it's built on the
Sorry. No, not about where your wallet. It's about the purse. It was this the luxury item.
Oh, okay.
So what is it? How it's connected to a luxury item?
Exactly.
Yes, there's different ways that this could be kind of, you know, gone about it. And some of the ways we've discussed, you know, with clients. I mean, the main thing that it does need to be addressed is the legal implications behind it, but that's still to kind of be matured out. But as far as, you know, a luxury item, a brand, when they create an item, they can mint an NFT that corresponds to it. And whether that's shared in a QR code with the item itself, or, you know, you receive them together in some way, you then forever basically have a stamp that says, you know, this item is real. And when you were to, you know, go sell it to the next person, you would sell whatever form that NFT comes in, whether it's just in a wallet, whether it's a QR code. There's many ways to go about it, but the main thing is seeing that original brand minted that NFT that corresponds to this item. So it's, you know, it's all about kind of like pointing towards it. If that makes sense.
So, yes, partly. But if I have a QR code that sends me to the NFT, What does stop certain organizations to put the same QR code on a copy and it points to the same NFT? So basically, you have a copy with a QR code that sends you to the NFT that proves it's real.
So then, you could be pointed to the NFT kind of description, but in that you would see who's the owner of the NFT currently, what it represents. You would see all that data. So if I owned an NFT that belonged to my luxury jacket, I would have an NFT that says, if I wanted it to say like my name, it could say like my name owns it, it's this jacket, or this address owns it. And then if somebody were to scan that QR code from anywhere, it would still show them that same data. It would say it's for a jacket that Paula owns. So even if you put it on something else, it's in a receipt. So it's an irrelevant receipt for a different item. And then if I were to sell it, then it would go to a new owner. So it'd say, jacket owns by this address instead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. So we're getting a lot of legal and copyright questions. I like that. One question from Gary. If an NFT is found to be part of a money laundering activity, is the author who is receiving the royalty also going to be prosecuted as they're receiving effectively a commission on an illegal activity?
Interesting. I think that's, one of those legal questions that, I think are still being worked out, but I think it would be the same as the traditional industry as well. If you do sell a very large piece of artwork that, ends up being correlated with money laundering, who is liable there, who was part of the criminal activity versus who was not. I think that would kind of apply in the same way. So if it was an innocent sell that then later got involved with it, my assumption is that you wouldn't be criminally charged with that, because you're kind of just more like a bystander in it. I think it's at the end of the day who's performing the criminal activity.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see how, legally speaking, all these things will end up working out. One question from Patrick: who owns the copyright in the case of digital art NFT?
Who owns the copyright of the digital? So it's interesting because these are when it comes to digital art, I'm still on the fence of some of its full applications, because at the end of the day, it just says you own it. So for example, Jack Dorsey's first tweet, somebody owns it, but they can't do anything with that tweet. They can't delete it. They can't edit it. They can't do anything. It just says they own it. So, when it comes to a specific piece of art, I think it would depend on how that specific art NFT was set up. But, I think in most cases, you probably would be able to kind of share it out. I think that would just depend on how that particular NFT is kind of set up. But yeah, it is a tricky scenario, because all it says is that you own it. What the actual piece means is some gray areas
to be defined.
Yeah, honestly, there's some places that I think are very applicable for NFTs, and some that I'm like, that still needs to be worked out over there.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's easier when it's fully digital items. It's more difficult when it's an NFT representing, let's say, something with a representation in the real world.
Exactly. And that's where the lawyers need to come in and properly put together some contracts that point those to each other.
Sure. And then we have a question from Andy. Say a Monet was put on an NFT for ownership, and say the blockchain became corrupted in the future. Is it possible to move that NFT to another protocol, or does that artwork ownership no longer exist?
I'm curious what you mean by the blockchain gets corrupted later.
I would presume he means there's a 51% attack and it gets abandoned, or probably some kind of event of that type. Andy, please correct me if you disagree.
Well, you could always bridge certain NFTs to other networks if that is kind of where it was deemed necessary. So we have looked at moving certain NFTs from the Ethereum to bridge it to some side chains and vice versa. I don't know what exactly happens in the case of kind of a corrupt blockchain network. The big ones at this point have not been corrupted and probably won't, hopefully, like Ethereum and those. And I think if those do get corrupted, I think I have a bigger problem on my hands. But you know, the idea is that it's there, it's an incorruptible kind of like blockchain space, and you know, it is, the record exists on there. But that is kind of an interesting question. What happens if the whole network goes down? I'm not sure there.
Sure. It's like if the Louvre burns down, you know.
Yeah, I'm like, oh goodness, that's awful.
Exactly. And then we have a question from Zachariah. Would it make sense to consider that Polygon Matic is a promising blockchain to trade NFTs? What other blockchains seem stable without high gas prices?
Yeah, so Matic is one that we've been looking into quite a bit recently. We've gotten quite a few client requests, and the more we've dived into it, the more promising it does seem for kind of NFTs. They're quite interoperable. It has support from most of the major marketplaces. It has the tools you need, like onboarding and offboarding and off ramps and everything, and low gas fees. So that is a really promising one. Some of the other ones we've looked into are Flow, which is what NBA Top Shot is built on. It is very promising in the sense that it's super focused on NFTs, but a little less promising that it's pretty new and it's almost so focused on NBA Top Shot that it's a little questionable whether you should bring your side project on it, because NBA Top Shot is taking up so much of the developer resources. But that is a popular one as well. And then some other just EVM compatible chains are also good choices to look at. So one that we've often built on as well is the POA network. It is another EVM compatible chain. So it writes like Solidity. However, the fees are incredibly low, and its reserve currency or its main currency is DAI or XDAI. So it operates on kind of a stable currency, which is good if you're kind of trying to appeal to traditional users that don't want to see the price of their item kind of shoot up and down.
Thank you, Paula. And then we have one question about the metaverse versus the real world. The commenter says the owner of a piece of Banksy's work recently burned the art in the real world, meaning that the only copy left is a digital one. Do you think that the metaverse development will be the limiting factor to NFT adoption?
Okay, that is a meta question. I do remember hearing that headline, which was a little unfortunate. I mean, I'm not sure how to answer like the metaverse aspect of it. The metaverse will be the limiting factor of the NFT. Was that?
Yeah, whether if I understand it correctly, I don't unfortunately have the name of the user who asked. I think that person might have jumped off. But it said, the question reads, do you think that the metaverse development will be the limiting factor to NFT adoption? So maybe the fact that things can only exist in that metaverse, less so in the real world, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's where I feel like some of the applications that I talked about like later on in the applications becomes easier to kind of grasp, because a lot of the ways NFTs have been talked about right now is very abstract. You own this tweet, you own this JPEG, you own that meme. It's a little abstract. However, the other applications such as your credentials, your diploma, those kinds of things, I don't think that that's very meta. That's just you own it and it's digitally written down. So I don't think the metaverse will be the stopper. I think it is actually just something that needs to be, overcome to just kind of make the NFT space less abstract and just easier for people to understand.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Paula. And then next question, can an NFT generate residual income or go up in value without being sold, or only when it is sold? There's two questions here. I'm going to ask the second in a minute.
Only when it's sold. I mean, you could, I don't know how you would see if the price has gone up. It's probably, just like when it's sold. I mean, I think as it matures, maybe you can see if similar assets go up in value, then maybe you can assume yours has gone up in value, just like you use your neighbor's houses to evaluate whether your house is going up in value. Sure, but nobody's really making a profit until it's sold. Just like when you sell your house, you could hold your house for 20 years. You don't actually make the profit till you sell it for 3 times more than you bought it. So you can have like indicators that your NFT is more valuable, and you can kind of see that, but nobody's making an additional profit till a sale is made.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Maybe in the future there will be like valuers, like almost like a separate profession. There was the second part.
NFT has gone up. Ooh,
exactly.
Based on similar NFTs.
There was the second part of the question was, do you price it, or is it auctioned and valued by popularity? So I think you answered that basically.
Yeah, currently it is kind of auctioned. I mean, I think it needs to mature more before you can have some good pricing mechanisms, because I think the space really, as like a talking point, is only 6 months old. There's not enough data to really easily point at what most NFTs would cost. So for the most part, they still are existing kind of in an auction situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then we have a question from Shannon. What solutions are out there for tying a wallet, ID, or minter to a verifiable person / legal corporate entity? I.e., how do I know the Jack Dorsey NFT was really from Jack Dorsey?
Mm-hmm. Reputation, basically. So, there's different ways that it can be shared. Jack Dorsey can straight up say, this is my address, from his Twitter, or from, some socially verifiable mechanism, this is his address, and that will never change. So you always know that that is his address. Also, if you have, a popular art gallery that has minted NFTs for all of its very famous artwork, you can see that. And, if somebody, mints a Monet and they pretend to be like the Louvre, but you see that it's a brand new address that has never minted anything and has never sold for anything, then you kind of know that that's not real. So, I think you're going to need third parties over time to eventually do some form of like verification mechanism. However, the information is there for anyone who wants to look. You cannot counterfeit that information. So there's no way to like pretend that your address is Jack Dorsey's if you haven't done anything that shows that you're Jack Dorsey. If that makes sense. It will need some form of third party that points at it and it says that's real, but then at that point it can't be changed in any way.
It's interesting. It's almost like we need some kind of Chainlink, like an oracle for NFTs as well. I just made one tweet already about that because it sounds like an interesting thing. And then we have a question from Zakaria. If you have any recommended readings in this regard, book, articles, specific platforms to continue the learning.
There are a lot out there. I've read quite a few of them. None have stood out to me where I was like, that's the one that made me click it in my head. But realistically, you can kind of like go down the rabbit hole of like, what is NFTs? And, the first Google page will really take you and you're going to go far from there. But I don't have, unfortunately, like a very, very specific one that I'm like, this person really lays it all out.
I usually, my go-to resource for that is A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz. They have like a NFT canon, which just is like a long list of the top articles and learnings on that topic.
Very cool.
I've just shared it here in the chat. If
I'll take that myself.
Yeah, it's quite helpful. And then there's another question from Shannon. Is IPFS the recommended solution for storing the underlying asset in a persistent distributed way? Or do you think that's more responsibility of the NFT owner? What happens if the URL changes, link rot, and we cannot modify the asset URL in the NFT?
So we actually internally do use IPFS. It is kind of the best way to store, a large amount of data that maybe can't currently be stored on the blockchain itself without just being too heavy of kind of an asset. So we currently do store it there, and then the NFT itself does point at that URL that ends up having all the information. I think the reason we do go with that is because it is kind of a serverless solution. We also use kind of the graph. And I would love to bring in my lead developer who is in charge of connecting all of those aspects to kind of talk on that more. But the reason we do that on that serverless system is because it is a bit more robust and should stay up. What happens if that does go down, I think is a question. But I think currently IPFS is the suggested solution for it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then we have a question from Hamad. Can a NFT be applied to physical assets like property deeds and sale documents?
Yes, and I think I think that is going to be a huge revolution once they're like properly applied. So as mentioned at the end, one of the biggest hurdles that still needs to be kind of covered is the legal realm kind of catching up with these NFTs, this kind of situation, to be able to make sure that they have the proper contracts in place to protect the owner of the NFT and protect them, to show that they own their house. So that is still something that really needs to be ironed out, so it's ironclad. But once it is, absolutely. So you could have your NFT that shows that you own this house, and then if you want to sell it, your buyer doesn't have to do as much due diligence because your NFT, you have the NFT. So there are still some specific logistics, but I think that is a place we will see explode in the next 3 to 5 years.
What I found also really cool is that you can have an NFT that, for example, represents real estate ownership, but then you can tokenize it and create ERC20s, which then represent part of the value that you then resell.
Yes.
But you still have the NFT that proves the overall ownership. So you have all these crazy things.
I questioned whether to dive into that on this one, or I was like, oh, that might get a little too deep. Yeah. But yeah, for some commercial, real estate that might have several owners, while you can't divide an NFT itself, you can create kind of a market around that NFT and, create an AMM that basically allows people to buy shares of an NFT. Because yeah, as you said, it does mint ERC20s that, represent shares of a certain NFT. And that is an application that I think is very interesting. And, I've had quite a few conversations on it, but it is a bit kind of like, a little bit heavier.
Yeah. There was one comment from David Moore in relation to IPFS to your answer before. He asked if maybe permanent storage could be offered via Arweave.
I have heard my developers talk about that quite a bit, but to be honest, I'm not actually as familiar as I feel like I should be with Arweave. So I don't know how that solution kind of plays in, but I feel like this is my cue to actually make the jump to learn it better.
Sure. And then there is a question from James. Which, if any, departments or government think tanks are looking at applications of NFTs? In your view, what could be the problem and or whose support will be critical that will accelerate adoption into the mainstream?
Yeah, so as far as governments go, the US government, the FDA, is using NFTs in supply chain. So my mom actually works for the FDA, so that's why she's like, NFTs, which has been a really funny turnaround in my life. So they're actually actively using them to mark where different drugs and food and stuff comes along the supply chain, which I think is very forward thinking for a government. So that is the main kind of government that I know that is actively using NFTs at the moment. I do see, credentials being a big play, down the line, but as far as I'm aware, I don't know too many governments actively using it. We have been in talks, however, with certain governments that are looking to implement credentials and creating kind of identity situations around their citizens where they can kind of store the different citizens' data, allow the different citizens to own their data through that. So yeah, I would say those are the two applications I've seen so far. And what was the last bit of the question again?
The last bit was what could be the problem and or whose support would be critical that will accelerate adoption into the mainstream?
Yeah, I think the main problem right now is still just general education. I think it's, it's a very complex and specialized technology that needs very specialized developers, which are kind of in a shortage right now. So, you know, getting governments to A, get to the point where they do feel comfortable enough diving into it, and then B, that they have the general development support to jump into this. Like, we have startups jumping into it, but governments typically are kind of the last to get on with it.
That's for sure. And then we have a question from Hamad, and Hamad, please correct me. I'm not entirely sure I fully understand the second part of the question. The question is, any good platform for NFT creation and reading when required?
NFT creation, OpenC is a really good one to just, you know, it's open. You know, they don't have any like gateways to, you know, be able to be certified to be an NFT minter. You can just go on there, connect your wallet, and start minting NFTs right off the bat. So I'd say that's kind of the best one to just start off from there. Yeah, I still don't have the resources, but like, I think you posted some good resources, but yeah, to kind of try your hand at a general NFT minting flow, I think OpenC is the best.
There's a question or follow-up question that from Patrick: is the OpenC contract really an NFT?
Yeah, you know, it's an NFT built on Ethereum. They are starting to launch their other chains. I think they are launching a Matic marketplace, and they may have a couple other side chains as well. But yeah, they have their contract that they support on OpenC.
Because, but Patrick, if you want, you can say it yourself.
Yeah, because the problem with the OpenC contract is that you actually can change the metadata after you minted it. So that means actually it's a fungible token, isn't it?
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you can edit, I'd have to look into that a little bit more. You know, you do have an NFT related to it, but I guess if you can change the underlying data, that kind of does ruin some of the application of it. We actually just primarily build like competitors to OpenC, so I've only been on it a couple times to like mint it myself. I don't actually keep up with my NFTs on it, but very interesting. We definitely, when we create our NFTs, we don't allow them to be edited afterwards, as that does kind of ruin some of the aspects of it.
Brilliant, thank you. And then there's a question from Andy. What are your thoughts on where the NFTs are held? There was a recent auction at Philips for an NFT artwork replicator sold for $4 million USD, and the details were held on Arweave, a decentralized storage network, which they said would never be erased. Is there a risk where the asset is located?
I think, yeah, there is always some form of risk. You know, if you do go with a centralized system, you know, you always risk that they have an issue centrally and, you know, they get hacked. I think that is an issue also with cryptocurrency. If you house NFTs yourself, so if you do it in your own MetaMask or your own hardware wallet or something like that, the risk is that you lose your seed, which sometimes I'm like, that's more of a risk to myself, but it's kind of in your hands. You know, if it is on Ethereum or some of these very popular side chains, I'm at least at the point where I don't necessarily worry about the network that much anymore. But I would suggest you just kind of hold it in your own wallet. I really need to look into Arweave a little bit more to be able to properly answer those aspects. But our answer is typically we just like to store it in some form of self-custody wallet.
Cool, thank you, Paula. And then there's a question from Leslie. What do you think about eBay's announcement that they will resell NFTs?
To be honest, hadn't heard of it, but honestly, it makes sense and good for them. I mean, I did say OpenC and some of those were like the eBay for NFTs. So good for them for being the eBay getting into NFTs. I think there is a question on how well they'll do it. I kind of want to look into that more. I think it makes sense for them. To be honest, I didn't think they were an actively evolving company, considering their front page still looks like it did 20 years ago. So that's cool that they decided to actually like hop in this space. I think that does say something. Yeah,
Leslie just posted the link to the TechCrunch article.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
One actually interesting point. So I tweeted about the oracles for NFTs. And there was already a response from basically one of the Chainlink people who said, in the case of Jack's tweet, it's backed by a cryptographic proof using a private key Jack holds, but Chainlink can be used for both verifiable randomness of NFT trades distribution, as well as a type of proof of reserves where you prove the off-chain content exists. I'm not too sure what to make of that, but it does sound like potentially there's an Oracle use case here as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that was a very heavy way to answer. I do feel like it was a good answer, but yeah, it's like you prove you own it, but you still can't do anything with the tweet. You can't delete it even if you own it.
Exactly. One question from my side. I'm curious about your thoughts. Why do you think that Uniswap decide to use NFTs to represent the liquidity provider positions in their version 3? Like I don't really know the answer, so I'm quite curious actually if you have any thoughts on that.
No, but that is some deep DeFi that I would like to know more on, because I mean I definitely highly believe in Uniswap. I'm going to write that down as something that I would like to search more, but NFTs for their liquidity pools, I don't have an off the cusp answer as to why I think they did that. I'm really not sure. It must be something efficiency, but there must be some pretty interesting technical reason. I would definitely look into that. I have to ask one of my lead Solidity developers on that, and he's going to come back with like a page of an answer.
And then there's a final question. I think now we got to the last one from Hamad. How can one get started?
One can get started, on some of the resources you just shared there, Oleg, but then just going on to, OpenC. I mean, I think depending on where you're even getting started, is getting your first cryptocurrencies to buy it, obviously getting it in that way. But then I would say connect your wallet to some of these marketplaces that currently exist, browse around, see what, things are being shared, how they're being owned, and how they're being kind of transferred and played around with, because I mean that's how I learned blockchain in general, was just playing around with it. So I would say just get in there and use the DeFi tools, and that's for any form of blockchain, whether it's lending, staking, anything.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paula. I don't think we have any more questions. Anyone has any more questions? Last chance. No, I don't think so. So Larry, I see Larry's back online. I think we can close things down. Maybe if anyone wants to have a last chat. But
Paula,
thank you.
Thank you, Oleg, for moderating as brilliantly as always. And Paula, thank you very much. I mean, I don't know, but I learned a tremendous amount, and it was incredibly valuable. And I thank you very much. And maybe in 6 months or a year, we'll have you back to reassess what's happened and how this market and this tool is developed. I'd be very curious to watch that and see if the market continues to develop and whether it takes it seriously or not, or whether it's, as I read the other day, I'm just a flash in the pan and a bit of a gimmick, and it will disappear like a lot of things in the tech world. We shall see.
Considering we're really diving into it, I definitely hope I have some good things to report. But it is a question, so I'd love to come back in 6 months and kind of say where.
Fantastic.
The last thing is for everyone on the call. We do have a Telegram community for Crypto Mondays. I'm gonna be posting the link to join shortly. So please, if you're not yet a member, come and join us there.
And one last thing, which is that we always record these sessions, and Devin will, over the course, I presume, of the next 24 hours or so, be posting the link to that on our Telegram site. So it'll be there for posterity. Maybe we can make an NFT out of it and put it out into the marketplace. But again, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again in mid-June. And look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And bye-bye.
feel free to send over questions as well to Linum Labs. We do this all the time, so we'd love to.
Thanks, Paula. That's brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.